engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious leaders, innovators, and people who are ready for the next level and beyond.
Welcome to Jodi Schafer. This has been something that I've been looking forward to for a long time because Jodi and I have had a chance to meet on numerous occasions to talk about a lot of very interesting subjects. But the one that's probably the most fun to talk with Jodi about is her viewpoint about reinvention and how Jodi, as a professional and advising other companies on the reinvention process through her work with human resource management services, how she has a very unique vantage point in the performance of an association or a business, and how important that human element is to the success of the business. How are you, Jodi?
I'm good. How are you guys today?
Doing really well. I'm really happy that we're spending time together today.
Yeah.
Jodi, we've had a chance to talk on many occasions about how important it is that there's really good and responsible leadership within a company, and how your vantage point of coming in to talk about or help solve human resource issues really is an interesting vantage point to really see what some of the cause of those are. And in many ways, you've made me believe that a lot of the HR issues that exist because of something going on within the leadership of the company.
Yeah.
So would you take a minute and explain from your vantage point how you see some of the issues that you deal with being rooted in leadership, and then kind of walk us through the trends that you're seeing and what that means for those of us that are studying leadership and want to be better leaders?
Sure. Well, let me just start by saying that I'm watching this whole mini-series right now on the Roosevelt. I don't know if you guys are watching this, but it's fascinating to me that, so they were just the last few nights talking about Franklin Delano Roosevelt and how he was a guy that was so beloved by the country, and the country, he came in right at the start of the Great Depression, and the country felt like they knew him, right? And he's in D.C., and yet the person who was kind of the lowest of the low felt like he knew them and he cared about them. And to me, that's just so interesting to think about that way of leadership versus some of the other clients that I've been involved with, where there's really a big separation or a big divide between the guy at the top and the little guy at the bottom. And I think that the organizations that do well because the guy at the bottom understands what the person at the top is thinking and why they make the decisions they make, and that there's a trust in those decisions. There's a trust in the ability to make tough decisions. There's a trust that the decisions being made are being made for the best interest of all versus the best interest of, a stockholder or their own wallet. And that happens through communication. I mean, you've got to be visible to folks within your organization, all levels of the organization. They've got to know you and who you are and what you stand for and sort of what your personal boundaries are. And from that, they decide whether or not they trust you and whether or not they respect you. So and if you have somebody's trust and you have their respect, it's amazing what they'll do for you.
So let me jump in here, and I want to really touch on this subject before we go on to some of the other interesting comments that you've made. But I want you to expand on this thing of trust and communication, and what trust and communication means to the generation of employees of today, and especially the generation of employees as we start looking to how we lead in the future. I think that you've hit the nail right on the head, that trust and communication are key. But expand for us a little bit about what that really means, and perhaps give us an example of where you've seen effective trust and communication and what that result has been.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I talk with my husband about this a lot with our generation, and I wouldn't say I'm in the millennials. I think I'm a little bit older than that, but I fall in this generation that was sort of disenfranchised because we saw our parents, and this is happening to me personally. I see my dad, who has worked for the same manufacturing company since he was 17 years old as a laborer. And there was a point in time where you went to join an organization, and there was this understanding that if you came to work and did your job every day and did it well, that you would always have a job, and that you might even have a pension afterwards or a retirement. It was kind of you give and you get. And then I saw that be taken away, as companies were bought and sold, or as they fell on financial hardship, and all of a sudden the get part on the employee's end started to shrink. And so my generation grew up sort of seeing that, and what we took away, or what I took away from that, was there are no guarantees. And so it's kind of like a every man for themselves, as you join an employer. So this idea of trust goes much deeper than just, do I trust you as a person, but do I trust where you're taking the organization? Do I trust that the organization is solvent? Do I trust that you're relevant? Do I trust that if I do a good job for you, that you'll notice it, one, and that you will reward it? And reward could be pay, it could be more responsibility, it could be the opportunity to move up, it could be training, but it's got to be a give and a take. And if the employee doesn't feel like those scales are balanced, that's where you start to lose some of that loyalty. And that's why you see a lot of, in my opinion, that's why you see a lot of employees now where the typical tenure at an organization is maybe 3 years, because there just isn't that trust that if I do well for you, that I'm going to be rewarded in the long haul.
Are you putting trust and communication in somewhat the same characteristic, in that if you are building on trust, that's a communication that people are recognizing and valuing and observing, or is there more in the communication than just the expression of trust, as evidenced by your observation of my behaviors and my decision making? What other ways are there to communicate that?
I think effective communication from a leadership level is a couple of things. One, it's direct. It's not sugar-coated. And I don't mean to say that you are brutally honest with people. I think you have to have compassion, and you have to treat people as human beings, and you have to understand that when you're having a difficult conversation, that there's going to be a human or an emotional reaction to that, and allowing time for that to happen. But it doesn't mean that you avoid the tough conversations. I think when people feel like you will tell them the truth, then they will trust you. When you say you're doing a great job, they'll trust that you really mean that, versus that's just a nice thing you tell everybody and then you turn around and fire them, tomorrow.
So the standard way we tend to communicate through the company newsletter or through email doesn't express itself very well in what you're describing right now.
What's fascinating about communication? There's a statistic out there. I think it's like 93%, or let me say it in reverse. 7% of communication, or 7% of meaning, is contained in the spoken word. In other words, the actual words that you say. The other 93%, I think it is, it's a huge number. The other 93% is contained in how you say it, why I think you said it, and any of the nonverbal cues that go along with it. All of that combined is how we as individuals derive meaning. So communicating through a newsletter or communicating through email has its place. And it's a nice way to kind of stay in touch, but it doesn't take the place of face-to-face communication, because people can misread email and they put their own tone into the words that you say, or they apply their own motives to why they think you said what you said. And again, it's that trust factor. So I think for leadership to truly be effective, and for people to want to come work for you, And they've got to buy into what you're doing. And in order for them to do that, they've got to see the passion in you. That's got to come through. And an email or a newsletter alone are not enough to do it.
I think it's fascinating that what you've described for us is that people are actually communicating with us by watching our behaviors and our tones and our attitudes, as opposed to what we are thinking we are communicating, which are our words.
Oh, absolutely.
And when you begin to understand the difference between those two as a leader, I think then you have dramatically different results, which leads me to the next area I want to ask you about, and which you have a very interesting observation point from, which is as you watch different companies and associations begin to change and accomplish greater things and be able to grow and be more valuable to its customers and members, as they are reinventing themselves, what are some of the key characteristics that you notice from your perspective that those good organizations going through reinvention on a regular basis have the ability to do?
I think you first have to recognize what you bring to the table that somebody needs or wants to buy. Because I can build a beautiful training program that I think is just the best thing since sliced bread, but if there's not a need for it, then it really has no value.
So the first thing we have to do is make sure we are being market driven.
Yeah, you've got to be relevant, and even better, you've got to be relevant for a need that people don't even realize is a need yet, but not so far ahead of the curve that people think you're crazy. So it's like a sweet spot of what do we have a reputation for, and how can we build on that so that people who have known us previously and trust who we are and the services we offered previously will willingly, continue to buy or continue to be members of a service line moving forward, because the services that we offered 10 years ago might not be relevant today. But what's important is that relationship that you have with your members or your clients or your customers. If they have come to know you as an organization that puts their needs first, or you're the organization that always has the latest, greatest data and statistics, or you're the organization that always has their ear to the ground and knows that this is what's coming, then I think I'm more willing to trust that your next service offering is something that I should probably buy, even if I don't know I have a need for it yet. But if you're telling me I do, and I trust you, then I'm likely to go on that ride with you. I think a good organization has the pulse of not only what is needed, but also really recognizes where their strongholds have been previously and how they can capitalize on that going forward.
What's absolutely fascinating as I listen to you talk is that your reputation as a company is understood by the marketplace. And if you're moving in a direction that makes sense for what they've seen you behave in the past and your ability to bring value to them, and so they trust that whatever you're bringing that's not quite developed but is developing, that they trust you and that when they need it, you will have it for them. And how many companies really truly do that, as opposed to being behind the curve and that the marketplace has already wanted what they're developing for quite some time and are kind of on the back end of that cycle. It's very reminiscent of a lot of analogies we hear about, but it's you have to make sure you understand where you're going and move in that direction and not just be following along, usually lately, on a trend that's really not that relevant.
Yeah, and don't you think too, it's your reputation. I think the good companies, the ones that are able to reinvent themselves and the services they offer and stay relevant, are the ones whose reputation isn't necessarily tied to a specific service or product line. It's tied to how they do business and who they are at their very core and what makes them better or different or unique from the guy down the street who does the same damn thing you do, right? So I think companies who really understand not only what they can provide, but who they are and how they do it and why it's better, those are the ones that can use that sort of capital, right? That, I don't know how you phrase it, but who really can drill into who we are and why people like us. And typically it's beyond what we bring to the table. Because for every service I provide to you, there are 4 other people down the line that can provide the same thing, and some of them might even provide it for less cost. So why me?
Right.
And if you can drill down to that, and if that can guide your decisions for new products, new services, I think those are the organizations that do well.
It's a very interesting perspective to hear you talk about how whether you're a company or whether you're a leader, how you define or differentiate your uniqueness, and then how do you make sure you're communicating that in those more non-written ways, those non-verbal messages that start to suggest trust and start to suggest intention, when truly you're going into a space that's a little bit unknown, but because of that trust factor, you have developed the reputation for, which something that you work on every day to accumulate to that point, which I think a lot of leaders assume is there. And what you're beginning to describe is that is something you slowly accumulate every day in your behaviors that others are watching. I want to shift to one very important point that you had brought up earlier in this conversation. We both are raising daughters, and we would both expect that the world would offer great leadership opportunities for all individuals. However, historically, and even in a comment you made earlier, you talked about the guy at the top.
Yeah.
Can you take some time as the mother of developing females, as a established professional female yourself? Can you spend some time and talk about the unique and important role that women play in leadership, the trends you see in the development of executives that are also females, and the importance of a company developing this very important group that I think today has been very underutilized?
Well, that's a really big question. I will attempt to throw my 2 cents in. And as you said, I have 2 daughters, a first grader and a third grader. And, one of my mentors growing up was my mom. And my mom was a working professional, never had the top seat, but always was the one that was responsible for keeping the doors open. It's kind of like you go into the doctor's office, and if you want to know what's really going on, you ask the secretary. She was kind of that person who kept everything going, but never really had the title that went along with it. And so I grew up under that, thinking that, you can do anything you want as long as you put your mind to it. And there is some truth to that, but there are also some stigmas and barriers that you realize you have to break through. And I think it's sad that in this day and age that we don't have more females in top leadership positions, especially when you look at the college graduation rates. And I think that there's more females now graduating than men. And it's not to say that you have to go to college in order to be in a leadership role. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I just think it's interesting that we have a pool of talent out there now with the appropriate skill sets, and yet when you look at the top, it's still underrepresented. Why is that? I don't know how PC this is of me to say, but I think part of getting to the top, historically, the traditional paradigm was directly tied to the number of hours you could put in and putting the company first. And I don't know a lot of working women who work outside of the home that feel they're able to juggle that internal struggle between wanting to do really well professionally and put in the amount of time it takes to get the job done, and still being able to juggle the needs at home if you choose to have kids. Because if you choose to have kids, right, men can't biologically, well, I think maybe one or two, they're like on the covers of magazines, but typically men aren't biologically the ones carrying the children. And then once you deliver the children, there's at least 6 weeks and sometimes 12 weeks and sometimes longer where you have pulled yourself out of the workforce totally. And your male counterpart, who's in the same position you are, who's vying for that same promotion you are, I think sometimes just because of hours can get a leg up. And I think that's a difficult challenge to try to balance. I also think that as women, we approach things a little bit differently. I think we are more in tune with relationships, and it can be difficult for us to be okay with a relationship where somebody doesn't like us, or somebody doesn't value us, or somebody doesn't agree with us. In our head, we know that not everybody will, but in our heart, that's tough. And I guess maybe I should just speak for myself. I still struggle with that, knowing that not everybody is going to think that I should be able to do the same things I want to do. You know, they think I shouldn't be able to do it. I want to do it. And how do you deal with that? It's tough. So I think we're trying to find our way. And I think one of the key things that are going to continue to help women is to be support systems for each other. And I'm not necessarily saying that women only, support groups should be there for women. I'm a big fan of having enlightened men be a part of my support group to tell me when I'm off base on something. But having that network is really key, I think, to continuing to elevate women in leadership positions, and having those people that you can go to and bounce ideas off of without feeling like you look weak or like you look unsure of yourself.
Jodi is one of those enlightened men who hopefully is a part of your network of professionals.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time today to have this conversation for us. I want to really quickly see if I can bullet point some of the real key things that you mentioned. And one which really struck me heavily was the importance of a leader understanding that it's probably their behaviors and attitudes that really are expressing and communicating their intent way more than the words. And I think for a lot of people, we've gotten that backwards, where we think that if we write down the right words on paper or say the right words in a speech, that's what makes sense, when in reality, what people are really paying attention to are your behaviors and attitudes when you're not doing those things, which then allow them to either trust you or not trust you, which is identified as one of the keys to leadership. The other thing that I thought was incredibly powerful that you were just talking about now, and I think you could talk about it at length, and that is the value that organizations have in bringing diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of background into their leadership structure, and then how important the interaction that those leaders can have together adds to their ability to accomplish. And probably you would agree that their own behaviors of working together allow those people watching them to build the confidence and the trust, because they're watching the interaction and they can see that the interaction is extremely powerful. And I think that as organizations, we have not taken the opportunity to really exploit what you have so adequately emphasized, which is this opportunity to network with each other and learn from each other and grow from each other while respecting each other and valuing the differences that we have. Sure, we're competitive, but the reality is those people who can actually grow and develop each other, which I think, and I don't know if this is quite as politically correct either, but which I think women do better than men, is an area in which all leadership can gain when we recognize that it's really a leader's role is to lift everyone.
Yeah, well, and that ties it back very nicely to this whole, mini-series on the Roosevelts, which is what I had started to talk about. And he said, everybody does better when everybody has more. It's not about the guy at the top. It's about everybody feeling like, or the girl at the top, I should stop saying that. It's about whoever is at the top, understanding that you're nothing without the people around you. If you could do this job by yourself, you would. But you can't. That's why you have a staff, and you need a staff that's committed to you. And as I tell my supervisors in training, just pretend as though you live your life in a fishbowl. And everything you say and everything you don't say, and everything you do and everything you don't do is on display for everybody to see and for everybody to judge. And you want to make damn sure that the words that are coming out of your mouth are mirrored by the behaviors that you exhibit, because that's where the trust comes from. If people trust you, they will work hard for you, and they won't jump ship in 3 years, hopefully.
Jodi, as always, this has been a very powerful conversation and a great learning opportunity for me. Can you really give us your website and your phone number for those people that want to contact you?
Yeah, the website is www.hrmservices.biz, B-I-Z, and my phone number is 517-974-8033.
Thank you, Jodi. You are a powerful inspiration to all of us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new episodes are available by following us on Twitter @PureReinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.